Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades all, and welcome to this evening's installment of Up Late with What Now? Is there an idea of what we're going to say tonight? Of course there fucking isn't. And just for the record, I have been here for a little while and have been watching your fangirl plan, just that I will not go live until the scheduled moment, so it's nice to know. It's as if I was among you the whole time. Yes, good evening to you all. As I say, this is going to be one of those situations where I just start moving my mouth and we'll find out together what I'm going to say. As you can see, Fernando is with me, and we also have two guests this evening in the form of the Tiny Teddies. These are cute, aren't they? I've had cause to be watching my niece and nephew during the pandemic, and they left these behind. They don't have names, so far as I can tell, so I have decided that this one is called Vesuvius, and this one is called Paul. And they will be with us throughout the evening, if and when I so choose to use them again. Who do we have among us? Because I was only reading the messages rather than looking at who they were from. Let us investigate together, shall we? Q, welcome back. It is always a pleasure to have you here. Dal, my extraterrestrial and perhaps extra-dimensional sister, we may never know for sure, but it is always a pleasure to have you here. And Howl is here too, my living shadow. So nice to have you all with us. What is going on down here? What do you have for me straight off the bat, Q? What is this? Buddy, you're yes. Oh dear. Am I pixelated again? Has my brief flirtation with decent camera quality already abandoned me? My. Everyone would vote for Paul. He is the sensible choice. However, we live in a era of mindless populist policies, so most people are going to vote for Vesuvius. And Fernando is the third party candidate who gets about 2.5% of the vote. So that was the week that was. And what an eventful week it was, too. And if you'll believe that, you will believe fucking anything. Kim Jong-un might be dead. We don't know. He very well may be. Which would make him, so far as I know, the only world leader in the history of the planet who died from eating too much cheese. Which is, something to go for. Still broadcasting from the moon. I am not on the moon. I am somewhere in the center of the noosphere. I'm a tiny bit distracted at the moment, ladies. I must apologize. I am watching as my new video slowly creeps upwards towards it to being uploaded to YouTube. It's happening as we speak. It's been doing it for a while, and it's still got an hour and a half left. It's only a 10-minute video, and yet it's taking this fucking long. Still, nevertheless, I am yours to do with as you please. What is on our collective minds this evening? The hive mind of Orphotube has descended upon me, and Ava is with us. Welcome. So nice to have you back. How have you been? And while we wait for answers, I open myself up to questions. As ever, What Now is here to answer all of your questions of life, the universe, and everything. Ooh, Dal. What a promise. I'm working on a Halloween-themed 20-minute timer. I really think about doing these writing sprint videos. I do, but as I said last week, I'm no closer to thinking on what I could possibly do to make them interesting. And well, hell, I don't even have a particular idea on how to make this particular video interesting. It just seems to happen, and you lot seem to keep coming. It's It's utterly beyond me. And now we're going to play my favorite game, which is the smudge on my glasses or on my eye? I like doing that. It makes me feel like every librarian in every movie ever. You know, it gets to the third act of a film, she takes her glasses off and shakes her hair out, and suddenly everybody wants to bang her. It really brings out my 80s exploitation feel. Oh. No, we still do not know. Right. We have answers. We have answers. We have had nachos. We have had video grumbles. What? I've been doing the Dewey's 24-hour readathon all day. Could I have a little bit of context for that, please, Q? That sounds horrifying. But it's hard to imagine you saying anything horrifying when your display picture is just so thrilled. You're so happy in your picture that you could be saying, they all died in the fire. And everyone would still have a good time. What do we have? It has been raining. It's been rainy, so I've forgotten. Oh, it's not for me. That message is not for me. Yes, I suck at sprinting too, but that's not so much to do with word count as it is that I'm a lazy, overweight smoker. I mean, I don't run if I'm on fire. I just sort of accept it. Merchandise, indeed. Would you care to elaborate on that, Ava? What are you making? Where can we get it? I mean, I don't have much in the way of a platform, but you are welcome to share whatever the hell you like here. Although, of course, presumably the people who are here already know, and it's only me who's out of the loop. Food getting. What in the asterisk is Jewish readathon? Yes. Nachos. We are all good for nachos here. Right, here. Long story short, Dewey started a readathon in 2007. They passed away in 2008. So Dewey's friends run it twice a year, when one day we just read for 24 hours. There's little challenges here and there. And what have you been reading? What has been your offering to this particular one? But just read as much as you can in 24 hours, basically. Well. And is this for charity or street cred or... I'm loving all these short stories. Oh no, now we've got a short story long. Magnificent. I'm making merch for a shop to offset the concept of sponsoring indie author publishers in ways that help improve their goals as indie artists. My God, Ava, that's a better day's work than I've done in my entire life. Very nice, very nice, very, very good cause too. I don't have a hat to take off to you, but I'll waggle a tiny teddy in salutation. That's my equivalent of doffing a cap. What's this? I've completely covered the message, so we will find out together what it says when I click it. I read Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie. That is just a car crash of a surname. Stiefvater? That's certainly German, something water. Anywho, and now I'm reading Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. Excellent. I don't think Ava's extra. She's certainly bloody motivated, that's for sure. Excellent. Well, I don't entirely know what to say. You've all been occupying yourselves significantly better than I have. Oh, Lord, what have I been doing? I'm still... Dal, you are a polyglot. I am not. I am cripplingly monolingual. Having no gift for languages, I chose simply to master the one I was born into. So Stiefvater Vorta. I'm going to call it Hot Rod. From here on in, any name that I cannot pronounce is going down as Hot Rod. And yes, Dar, that includes all the ones in your story. Gulliver Wolf wandering around trying to find Hot Rod. Yes, what have I been doing with my time? Well, I am reading as much as I can, but I appear to have developed the attention span of a gnat. So I'm hopping from one book to the other. I'm really deep into Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall, which is a phenomenal piece of literature. It's a book that's so good it makes me want to stop being a writer, because I will never ever write as well as that. And I've got the sequel, and the third one of the trilogy has just been released. So I'll have to get a hold of them. Love Smiles is among us. Welcome back. Very, very, very nice to have you here. My. Well, here we all are. The whole gang, more or less, is here. As we stand. But yes, I genuinely can't recommend the Hilary Mantel, Thomas Cromwell series enough. It's historical fiction as it should be. It's living, it's vibrant, it's so good that even though I know the history, I know what happens, I am finding myself asking, I find that I'm asking myself, what happens next? And that's only ever happened to me once with Robert Harris's Pompeii. It is a thriller that was written so well, but in a book called Pompeii, I was genuinely asking myself, oh, wow, what's going to happen? What could any of these foreboding signs mean? It's because I'm ostensibly working on a piece of historical fiction at the moment. I mean, for those of you who've been following my journey, shall we say, it's not exactly historical fiction, but it is mostly historical fiction. So I'm trying to lay my hands on as much of it as I can. And fun fact, a lot of it is fucking awful. But I think I may have talked about this before. Somehow, I'm getting the feeling that I have made this little diatribe once before. There's a fantastic one that I will be rereading once I finished these, because it's been a couple of years since I first read it. And it's by Anthony Burgess, who more famously wrote A Clockwork Orange. And in the 60s, towards the back end of the 60s, when he had worked with, or started working with, pardon me, when he started working with, dear God in heaven, I do apologize, Stanley Kubrick, to make a film of Clockwork Orange. Kubrick was also trying to get his Napoleon movie going, and he hired Burgess to try and write a version of the history of the life of Napoleon for the film, and trying to replicate a working relationship that he had with Arthur C. Clarke in 2001: Space Odyssey. It never happened. It never worked out. That's why none of us have ever seen Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon, but he did turn into a novel, and it's called The Napoleon Symphony. Now, it does this fascinating thing, because the older I've got and the more I've pursued being a writer, the more I've become obsessed with structure and how it works and how it can be used as much a part of the text as the text itself, as opposed to simply a scaffolding in which to hold the text. And what Burgess does, or did anyway, because he's fucking dead, in the Napoleon Symphony, was he took Beethoven's, what is it bloody called? You'll have to forgive me. I'm a little bit, believe it or not, it is incredibly warm in England at the moment. And what now does not handle the heat well. I'm a little bit scrambled. But anyways, one of Beethoven's suites, and he has taken the life of Napoleon, fit it into an orchestral suite, and retold, and somehow managed to take the framing of music and turn it into a literary structure. And it's incredible. It's absolutely phenomenal. What's this? Yes, I have three science fiction stories that I really want to do, but I'm pacing myself. I'm trying to do these one at a time. What's this? Who's mentioning stuff there? Mom talks about YouTube could hang out. Yes, we could, and indeed one day we may. It's a small enough world after all. Can't handle it. Yeah, mist, rain. I'm very much an autumn and winter creature. I have heard, it's an old wives' tale, I think, that depending on what season you're born in, you have an affinity for the opposite. So given that I was born slap bang in the middle of August, I can't bear the summer. Yes, it's at least broiling. You know when you boil ribs to prepare them for the inside of my head is looking an awful lot like that. Actually, it's a plot bunny boiler. That's what my head is right now. Yes, the Napoleon Symphony by Anthony Burgess. It is remarkable. It's fantastic because I the older I've got, excuse me, protect me, tiny teddies. They won't. They're waiting for me to die so that they can get the gold that lives in my bones. But you're not getting it tonight. I find myself with an aversion to the 3 act structure, and particularly the hero's journey. In fact, to the point where I sort of lay them aside as soon as I spot what's going on. I mean, it's not that difficult to do something interesting with the 3 act structure because it's only a baseline. It's only a floor plan, and you can do exciting things with it. But you would be amazed how few people do. So you'll read things that, and you're just ticking off the beats, and it's impossible to have any emotional investment when you can pretty much you know what's going to happen next. It's like a Lego set for a novel. You know, and here are all the figures. Here are your stock characters, and you can put whatever clothes and faces on them you like. You can name them however you like, but it's just a terribly formulaic. There it is. Thank you very much, Dal. You are way ahead of me. So I want people to be fucking weird with their structure. There is no good reason for sticking to the rules of reality in the text. You can do whatever you like with written word. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Sergei Eisenstein. I think it was one of the Moscow school, but I can't remember who it was because my brain is boiling. But anyway, it was one of the pioneering filmmakers. I'm pretty certain it was one of the Moscow school, so I'm going to say it was Eisenstein, but I'm probably wrong. But anyway, he talked about film as sculpting with time. Now, I know it's sort of bad form to look at filmmaking and apply it to fiction writing, But occasionally there are overlaps where the advice can work both ways. So I'm not just talking about a non-linear structure. One book I can't recommend highly enough for this. I mean, it's a remarkable piece anyway. It's one of my favorites. Again, it's a book that's so good it made me want to stop being a writer for a while, and I just had to take a walk and reevaluate my life decisions. Is David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas is phenomenal. It shouldn't work. By every law of storytelling you are taught, this novel should not work. It certainly shouldn't be a masterpiece, and yet it is. It may be one of those alchemical things, because he has been trying in his last 3 novels. I know he certainly tried to do it in The Bone Clocks, which incidentally, The Bone Clocks, I've not read. I've read the first 3 chapters because I got like a sampler of it, and it's a great title, The Bone Clocks. And this isn't really a spoiler. It's just a great little thing that it's about various races of immortals who are all immortal in different ways. It's wonderful, man. Wonderful, man. But the bone clocks are what they call humans. I love that. But he's tried to replicate that magic, that lightning in a bottle he got with Cloud Atlas, and he can't quite do it. It's like it was a freak experiment that couldn't be repeated again. But for those of you who oh, hello. My favorite cephalopod is with us. How are you? I get the feeling we spoke earlier, but it's been a very long and very warm day. So time is not... Here I am talking about how maybe I've gone too far down the rabbit hole of the non-linear structure, because time means nothing to me anymore. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Cloud Atlas has, as a novel, the film is different. They do something different with the film. They use more like a mosaic structure, which is perfectly legitimate, but it's far more deliberately organized in the novel, where it's 6 stories, and you get, because it moves forward in time, you get half of it. You get half of the first story, and then you get the second story, where in that, one of the characters finishes reading the first story, and then you only get half of the second story before the third one starts, and it climbs up like this until it goes back down again. But within all of the stories, each of the preceding ones is a fiction, and it was a eureka moment of what a story can be. And I'm curious if any of you had those eureka moments when you stumbled across something, whether by sheer accident or it was recommended to you, that suddenly made your thinking go in a different direction. What have we got up here? What's going on? Any minute past an hour is too long. Absolutely, I am with you all the way. Well, Dal, you raise an interesting question, and it's one that the people in the audience may wish you'd never asked, because oddly enough, I have some views on this. Because time is famously described by Einstein as a stubbornly persistent illusion, because it seems that time is, so far as we can tell, something only humans do. It may very well just be a part of our evolutionary wiring, because the thing about evolution and sensory information is it only gives you as good as you need. That's why we need to build computers to do an awful lot of the imagining for us, because we are not capable of doing so much. But he also had this idea of that the Eternalists picked up on, and the reason it's sort of overlooked, because it is an Einstein idea, but he never wrote about it in a scientific journal. He wrote it to the widow of a friend upon his friend's passing. And eternalism is the idea that what we would consider time, at least the passage of events, is fixed. And everything that ever had happened, always happened, and anything that's going to happen has already happened. It's just we who are inside it who think it's a straight line and we're moving through it. If you could step outside of it, you'd see it's more solid. The passage of time, so argue the eternalists, is an illusion. And he wrote this to her to comfort her, to say that he's not gone. Physically, in terms of the physics of the universe, he's still there somewhere, you just can't perceive him anymore. And this is kind of a nice idea because it means that death is something that only happens to other people. And even then, not really. Personally, I don't worry all that much about it. I'm more inclined to think that it is constantly fluid. I'm more with Heisenberg than Einstein on this. Because needless to say, as we all know, Einstein had particular problems with the quantum school and the uncertainty principle, and then Feynman comes along and says, "No, that sounds about right in terms of how time passes." Sorry, I've gone off on a complete tangent. Time, don't worry about it. Do not worry about it at all. I can invest off the bone clock for a couple of years and still haven't read it. Let me know how it goes. I've only read the first few chapters. And I would like to read it because apparently there are some characters from Cloud Atlas within it. So he may or may not be developing a shared universe. I don't think which books, because I've had that many. Yeah, it's and the thing is, when you actually start going out looking for them, you can end up being turned all the way around, but not back where you were. It's like it's not so much spinning 360; it's more like a spiral. I sympathize with that statement more than you can no doubt. But yeah, the interesting thing about one more interesting thing is about David Mitchell is he's part of, and Margaret Atwood did the first one. I can't remember because it's been going for a few years now, but in Norway, there's a project, I think it's called the Century Library, where they cut down 100 trees and they have been having authors, internationally renowned authors, write a novel per year that will be printed on the paper from these 100 trees. And they will do that for 100 years. So Margaret Atwood and David Mitchell have novels that are sealed in a vault that will not be opened for, I think now 95 years. I think did they start doing it in 2015? Say they started doing it in 2015 for the sake of argument. These books will not be available until 2115. And I kind of like that idea. I like when people do these projects that are looking forward. They're sort of trying to shake hands with the future. I like that. Particularly, I mean, they call nostalgia the English disease. So I very much live in a country that is obsessed with looking backwards, as if the past gave a shit about us. So I'm always moved in my cold, dead heart when people are doing things that are actively looking towards the future. Oh, first one, then the second one. Tend to think that time is sacred and everything begins at the end of something. Fair. Like you're constantly living, then dying, then restarting somewhere else. not so much reincarnation, but as your self elsewhere, if you believe we're in multiple universes. Ah, right. You've already made every choice, and you never know which you is the one that made the choice. Yeah, this is linked in with the biocentric view of the universe, which is as part of it is the concept that consciousness exists in the quantum level, and is so the human brain can be considered a quantum computer, which yeah, you can definitely get on board with that idea, and that consciousness is subject to. I do apologize. I'm baked and not in a good way. But yeah, so the idea being that there's the oscillation of five-dimensional mechanics and the different universes playing against one another. So you are linked to every possible permutation of the space-time event that can be considered you. And perhaps there is something in this. There is something in Hinduism, and God help me, I can't remember what this is called either. But it's where they view it as the connection between consciousnesses as a net, and every human being is the node that makes up the intersection between different strands. So I think if you pull that across transcending space-time, I think that's what they're getting at. I think. But to be honest, sometimes I can spend days letting my mind drift amongst these very highly considered points of view, really drifting between these monoliths of abstract thinking and wisdom. And then, there are some days where I forget how to tie my shoelaces. So this is really the human experience. It's like Terry Pratchett said, where we're trying to unravel the mysteries of the universe using a brain that was developed to help a monkey find fruit. So it's really two steps forward, one step back as a species. What's this? What if we meet someone who's not here, but someone somewhere else, and that's the only individual who'll ever get you? Well, yes, Cerebral Hedonist, thank you so much. That certainly sounds familiar. Right now, this with that statement, you've exposed the fallacy behind the idea of the soulmate. Which, I mean, I don't have a blackboard and chalk to draw up the maths of why it doesn't exactly work out, but it is a bit of a fallacy, and it's a bit of a problem, because what if your soulmate has been dead for 200 years, or will not be born for another 200 years, or possibly more tragically, is born within your lifetime, but there is an insurmountable age difference. So I always rankle a little bit. I always find it a bit soppy and Hallmark trying to sell you chocolates idea of the soulmate. Did I see an Aphrodite up there? I think I did. Does anybody else want to go ahead and remark upon the fact that the very second we started talking about soulmates, Aphrodite turned up? Coincidence? Yes. Yes, it is a coincidence. It is. It's a part of our new mythology. It built up our worldview, even though it is utterly baseless. What do you love, the cerebral hedonist? Is it Aphrodite's series Bible that you love? Because we all do. We summoned her, but I did not see a clamshell. It's horrifying. Fuck me, it is really, really warm. It's only April and it's far too warm. I'm a Celt, I can't handle this. Who are you gonna call? I've got a whole new meaning to Ghostbusters. But then there's always the problem with reincarnation. Because if every soul has been around since the beginning, is fashioned from the great cosmic detritus, and is then incarnated in a human form, well, there are significantly more humans year upon year. Where are the new souls coming from? Unless somebody can show me like a graph against the decline of animal life and the rise of human life. Because if all the animal souls have all of a sudden found transcendence and are becoming humans, my God, is our overpopulation down to a ridiculous and exponential spread of good karma amongst the invertebrate population? Possibly. But also, why then is it not possible for one soul to be reincarnated as two people? The thing is, in my book, there is a character who deals with... I've just realized that Howl is reading my book at the minute, and that would have been a tremendous spoiler. So I can't actually follow that line of thinking. Oh, you and your Southern Hemisphere privilege. What if a soul isn't comprised of simply one part? After we're done in this life, so that soulmates could be many too many, several tiny connections. Now that's an interesting idea, and it would sort of speak to a not necessarily mistranslation, but a misconception on the idea of love. Because in the Western world, love is considered mainly in the romantic or the platonic, as in familial sense of the word. But in certain Eastern practices, love is defined as the means by which one seeks to improve or better the life of another. So in that respect, and throw in this oscillation of something being greater than the sum of its parts, then that could be an interesting interpretation of it. Oh, it's all kicking off up here. There's a lot of people walking around with emperor penguins. Yeah, they all. This is why David Attenborough just won't die. This is because he's being blessed constantly. He has given them passage to the road to Nirvana. I have a character with a split soul. You've got to tell me more about that, please. Oh, Dal, I really want you to read my book too, but I really like the fact that you like me, and my book isn't very good. So I worry. Oh, okay. I have 10 minutes from. Okay, I have 10 minutes for this moment. So, in my book, there is a character who specializes in assist. She exists to assist dead people into their next reincarnation. And she's the one who works out how well you did in your life and what you need to build you up in the next one before you get to where you've got to go. And I love her. I maintain she is the best character I have ever created, and I love her so much. And the crux of the matter is that she is now in the company of someone who may actually be irredeemable, who has possibly run out of chances. But there's a Hippocratic oath amongst the spirits. She has to help him. I need to work out this recut. I'm not entirely happy with it. She seems to have been bumped down the running order, and she was supposed to be a leading character, but in this new edit, and not by cutting anything out, just by rearranging it, she seems to have. So I'm hoping that the strength of her character and the section she's in are enough to lift her up. I love what I've started here. What if our souls here out of the greater hereafter, our stars out of the universe, and we bang? I'm just going to let that linger there because that's a very, very pretty idea. I mean, the thing is, we are free to make these assertions and play with these hypotheticals because, so far as I am aware, and I try to keep my finger on the button of this kind of thing, no one is closer to an answer. So I think it's a bit of a free-for-all. We can speak like this. Out of great hereafter, stars out of the universe. Well, the ancient Greeks, who one of my favorite things about the history of antiquity and classical civilizations is when you study Greek mythology, and then you invariably end up reading more about life in ancient Greece, you find out there's this very interesting relationship between the Greeks and their gods. Namely, they don't like them. There's this really interesting relationship. I mean, it's like now in the West today, which to a greater or lesser degree is predominantly Christian, the idea of railing against God, the monotheistic father God, is a taboo. It's certainly blasphemy. But the ancient Greeks had no such qualms. I read one thing, which was an account. It was a letter from an Athenian. I think he was a pottery dealer, a ceramics dealer, and the letter to his sponsor basically read along the lines of, the shipment has been delayed, the ship's never left port because Poseidon is a fucking asshole. But they had this image of the universe, because don't forget, the Greeks were the ones who worked out that the Earth was round. They were, so far as we know, they were certainly the first ones to write it down. Other cultures may have done so beforehand, but I can't think off the top of my head of any written documents. So, but that the stars were the holes in heaven. The light that we see was actually coming through small holes in presumably the floor of heaven, which probably didn't improve their relationships with the gods. There's just one soul, and living beings all have a tiny part of it. Yeah, again, this is Hinduism. This is because we know Buddhism for the longest time was considered a Hindu heresy. Not so much now, but yeah, this really speaks to that older image, because again, it's the difference between what this goes back to what we were talking. I don't think you were you here, Aphrodite? I can't remember when we were talking about Einstein's idea of eternalism and how time only looks like it's passing when you're inside it. So perhaps individuality, you only feel like you're an individual when you're inside it. If you can step out of it, it'd look very different, which also is a major plot point of my book. It's shit. And begs in a good way. No, Ava, you continue. Please, by all means, continue. A just adult version of Souls. I like it. Yeah, it's we don't. It. I mean, I've heard one argument that I think it's sort of building off what we were talking about earlier with the biocentric idea of the consciousness as a having its root in the quantum. That being because I presume you're all familiar with the observer effect, that it's impossible to leave anything untouched. The very act of observing something changes it, even mildly. Well, for a human being, considering themselves, because with very few exceptions amongst the higher mammals, we are the only sentient, which is to mean self-aware, self-conscious species. We are both the observer and the observed. So it's possible that consciousness, or at least the sense of self, is an illusion, much in the same way as when you push two positive ends of a magnet together, you can feel the force between them. But this is developed from that. Ay. Building up a reader list here. Sorry, I know there's been chats further down. I just got not saying that's how I believe it, but it's about no. All aboard the Train of Thought. This is what now is all about. Yeah. I suppose that's fair. Oh God, it all popped down. That's. Oh yes, I remember mentioning her too. Yes, she's the closest thing to an avatar of death. There's a few in my book. There's not one Grim Reaper. There's sort of facets of death between them. All right, weird shit. Lol, I will gladly share with you all soon. This is all about the weird shit. I'm sometimes in a mindset of going rogue and sort of establishing a pirate state within Orphotube because it's full of wonderful and shiny people, but they're wonderful and shiny people. And yeah, I sort of want to create a tiny rogue nation of the weirdos and the freaks and the bad guys. Oh, steamy, you say? I can only hope that means it's in a swamp. What's that? What? If I could get a little bit of context for that, Aphrodite. Good Lord. Oh, oh hell, oh horror. Oh hell's bells and buckets of blood. We're out of tortilla chips. Can I put my headphones back on? Is it still spoiling? You know what? I'm just going to see if you have put your headphones back on before I answer that. Because what's the point of saying put your headphones back on if you can't fucking hear me? Will somebody please tell Howl she can put her headphones back on? Yeah. Only building up the hopes. I can't take any more hope. I came back in time for the swamp. Yes, the League of Lurid Gentlemen. I get on board with that. I mean, we're sort of developing into a D&D party anyway. Ah, I should have known. I should have known. Of course. It's quite obvious. When it comes to Greek mythology, I'm really happy that in recent years people have suddenly discovered or rediscovered the fact that Persephone was not just a pushover. For the longest time, the general view seemed to be that Hades had kidnapped this poor, defenseless, and no. Persephone was most definitely a more than capable queen of the underworld. I'd like to see more of that. Actually, if I remember correctly, there was an episode of. Do you remember the Hercules TV show from the 90s? I think there's an episode of that that does the Persephone story. And it's sort of a case of she was in on it, but they made it look like a kidnapping. that's more than accommodating. Oh, I've skipped over Dal here. I must never ever do that. Yeah, it's a yeah. There's nothing there. I can't. You're right. It's quite clear. Mind you, they were a peculiar people, but fascinating in so many respects. There's an old one about the king of Athens in whatever century BCE was asked who was the most powerful in Greece, and he said it was his 2-year-old son. And he said, because Athens rules Greece, I rule Athens, my wife rules me, and our son rules her. But it's you spend all this time getting into the nitty-gritty of the universe. I mean, what did they give us? The beginnings of science, the beginnings of modern politics. They formalized the theatrical tradition, and most importantly, the first Yo Mama joke in recorded history was from the Greek philosopher Diogenes. Don't you worry after that, you take your time. But yeah, the story goes that Diogenes, leader of the Cynics, lived in a vase on the high street. Willing poverty. Apparently, the only thing he owned was a bowl until the day he saw a child drinking from a puddle with their hands, at which time he threw away the bowl. But he was witnessing. What is this? I just messaged Persephone of AT recently. Hadn't seen her around in a while. I'm so sorry, Ava. I'm not 100% certain on what you mean. Oh. Georgian mythology. Do you mean Georgia was in Eastern Europe? Is there a Persephone in our little community? I had no idea. As the designated Lord of the Underworld, I should have known this. I promise you, I'm not responsible. This is nothing to do with me. Right, yes. Yeah, it's a peculiar alphabet the further east you go. I've been told on reliable authority that if we take Russian for an example, if you want to read Russian literature, as I do quite regularly, if you want to read it properly, you have to learn Russian in order to read it, because it's one of those languages that is so difficult to get a proper thematic translation from. You can do it conversationally, or so diplomacy exists, but trying to read, say, Gogol or Bulgakov is you're not going to get it in English. I don't know what to do. What? And you dare to compare this to Russia? But no. I was just because I read a fair amount of Russian literature, but it's all in English. So I just chose that as an example that I could actually talk about. So here's a fun thing. We've been chatting, we folks, for about an hour now. And just in that second, I noticed Fernando behind me. I forgot I put him there. I nearly came out of my fucking skin. So I'm going to move him before I squeal like a peeled child. Well, I don't know if I have anything to read. I can go into my files if you like and look for something. Please. Yeah, the terrifying thing is, it was because I felt a breath on my neck. What can we do about it? Yeah, I have books. None of them are around me. I mean, the cabinet that is next to me is for all the fancy ones. So unless you want me to read the Oxford Compact Thesaurus, Moby Dick, A Life of Henry VIII, the Oxford Dictionary of Music, Philippa Gregory, no, Lorna Doone. No, I don't think anybody wants any of these read to. All right, let me see what I've got. I wish I had some of my new one on the computer, but alas, it's all written down and in my office upstairs. Could I get away with this? Okay. I've got, providing that they fucking open, I've got things. I've got some oddities. How do we feel about oddities? Let me know. Is this the right one? Yes, it may very well be. Yes, fine. Pardon me. I'm in a duel to the death with Microsoft Word. You're not getting my fucking money. So, the only things I have, because I was a fool and I didn't put out a call for the book at bedtime. Again, it's been a bit frantic this week. I have two things. I have the openings of two books from my trilogy, dark fantasy and the development of hopefully a separate mythology. You have a choice of two. You can either have the beginnings of the first chapter anyway, of my Nightmare Christmas novel that is founded around the pagan roots of the festival, turned into a horror story. Or you can have, that's the first one of the trilogy, or you can have the beginning of the second one, which might be the strangest thing I've ever written. Dal, I will certainly do that. But those are your options. You can have the first chapter of the Nightmare Christmas one, or you can have the first chapter of the strangest thing I've ever written. Are these just general notes on paganism, or is this a vote for the first one? I mean, it is April and it's a Christmas novel, but some of you may have seen a video of mine from the year before last, where I read the first few paragraphs of the Christmas chapter rather than the whole chapter. We have Dal votes for the second, that being the strangest one I've ever written. Anybody else for that? Going once. Going twice. Oh, no. We've got one vote for Christmas one. Right, Howl, even though there are 7 people apparently watching, there are only... Oh, no. Love Smiles are still with us. So I've got 2 for... Are you voting in on this, Howl, or are we going for plurality? Oh, wait, I've got Tiny Teddies. No, not you, Vesuvius. Paul. Well, you know what? I have the second. Howl. In your own time. Yes, Tiny Teddy's a wonderful Howl, but can I have a vote, please? I have... What have I got? Oh, you know what? I'm going to go with the Nightmare Christmas one, purely because there's dialogue in it. There isn't dialogue in the or at least there's not much in the way of discernible action in the second. Love it though I do. As an idea, anyway. Where are you? Oh, come on, I know you're here. I created you. You will bow to me. Bow before your king. Good Lord, I haven't looked at this in a while. Right. We will find out together if this is anything. And if you can... Oddly enough, Howl, so did I. Mine is a strange and bleak history that we will not discuss at any great length. So, it's been a while since I've looked at this, and if you can... Oh, if you're interested, all of you, but specifically Howl, who is reading the damn thing at the moment, this is the first one that follows on from the world my current novel creates. So there'll be like returning characters. Haven't read over this in a while, And if you can ignore the cognitive dissonance that comes along with this is a Christmas novel and we are in a very warm April, maybe it will cool me down. But are we ready, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen? I will take your untyped silence as a yes. This is called The Long Christmas Eve. Oh, it will be. There we go. There's something in the way the trees move, especially when there's no wind. Something in the way street lights catch branches and road signs and railings. When the lights go out and the shadows take on deranged lives of their own. When the wind finds a voice and the earth twists away from the life-giving sun, there's something in the way the trees move, watching, whispering straight into your head, run. Run so you can be chased. Run so you can be caught. There's something in that shadowed hush, graceful, vicious, and altogether wrong. Sometimes there is the unfathomable sensation that something is watching you in the dark, that there are faces in the flames or sleigh bells in the snow. Then you feel it. For just a brilliant, burning moment, you feel the great starless night and the roadless wild, the blood and the wind, the forests and the plains on the curve of antique imagination, and the sudden clinging horror to know beyond all doubt we are not alone in this world or this room. But it's just a moment, melting away and soon forgotten. It's not as if anything was chasing you, coming to take you away, and you forget that you ever thought or even wondered. So, of course, you never actually did. Never actually wondered who was looking out of the flames at you. Never wondered who was driving the sleigh in the snow, or where they were going, or why. This is a true story about the nightmares and the dream war, about the coming of the withered king and his army of terrors, and the collapse of the walls between the worlds and the humans who saw too late what was happening. None of it actually happened, mind you, but that doesn't mean it isn't true. Unless you're in a courtroom or a laboratory, true and real don't have to mean the same thing. There's a first time for everything you see, though it's never been as simple as that. Everything breaks apart into its own little pieces sooner or later, genes, thoughts, molecules, and dreams, until time and tide wash them together again looking fresh and new. But nothing ever changes. We tell the same stories, and we live the same lives, telling after telling, and age after age, until, like a face in the crowd, there's something dreadfully familiar. You've been here before. Many, many times. You never left, in fact, because it never ended. There is a first time for everything. Everything is a first time. First times, pardon me. There's a first time for everything. Everything is a first time. First times are everything. There's a first time for first times. This is one of them, and it starts like this. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and there was something in the trees. Listen. Crisp depressions crunching snow underfoot. Silent forest goes on forever, barring the horizon with narrow trunks. Winter gnaws their bark and twists them into ghoulish shadows. Trees lurk, shadows skulk. The wind shrieks, frenzies branches into a cloister of serpent rattles. Something has come, breathing beneath the snow. There's a stirring in the womb of the world. One good seed in the frozen dream soil, a great beast scent on the wind. The trees know it. Their branches hiss, it is near, hiding, waiting, growing, too weak to walk, too small to take shape. It listens, it watches, it waits. Look, a flicker weaving off among the bars of trees, rolling closer. It flares and becomes a flame and a hobbling, bent figure to carry it, crunching through the snow. The wanderer is weary, wreathing his shaggy head with panting breaths of steam. It moistens his ragged beard. The ice in the air freezes it stiff. He stops a moment and leans against a trunk. Cold as flint eats through his furs into his shoulder. No warmth even from his torch now. Blunt glare in the swollen darkness. The cold drinks its heat. His name is Nitim, foremost of hunters in name, and now no means of returning to. This much he knows, clinging to it for all the good it serves. A tracker with no path, a hunter with no prey. His stomach tears with hunger, his body splits for want of sleep. No matter what direction he looks in, he cannot lay a memory to any of them. No comfort of familiarity for his weary eyes, his stiff limbs, or his breaking back. He has walked further than he can recall, through snow and ice and forest. His world is snow and ice and forest. His mind is snow and ice and forest. He knows not how he came here. He can recall no world outside of it. Yet it seems to him, from time to time, a ghost of recollection. Did he know this place? Had he not walked these woods before once upon a time? Had he not spied them in a... He heaves his throbbing form from the trunk and, guideless, presses on. Man is not alone here. He feels the keen presences among the trees. They have followed him all the way. He can feel them flanking him now, but cannot see them. He raises his torch. There is only the endless twisting passages between rigid trees. Predators. He knows they're there. From any of these places they could rush and have him. It knots him. Breath comes sharp and short. Spots before his eyes. He is hunted. There is nothing he can do to stop it. He hurries his pace. Panting, steaming. The hairs on his neck rise, his skin crawls, one of them close at hand. He spins and hollers, brandishes the torch and spear. Darkness. Nothing more. Perhaps there's something there, on the outermost fringe of gloom, a thin figure stepping nimbly back behind the trees, and there another. Perhaps. But nothing comes. His eyelashes are thick with trailing snowflakes. His breath rasps and tears and chokes. He is both alone and surrounded. He is lost, yet cannot recall where he belongs. He is predator and prey. He roars again, waves his torch in a wide circle around him. It barely leaves a mark in the darkness. He daren't blink lest that moment's abyss give a signal and claws wrench him into the trees. The torch stutters in his frozen hand. The meager shadows writhe and flicker. He cries out once again, "Show yourself! Show yourself! Come out so I'll see you! I'll see you! Come out or let me pass freely! Pass freely!" Nothing more. They do not come. His legs quiver and soften like flax. He stumbles, catches himself, and continues on as fast as breath will allow. A twig breaks, a thunderous crack in the silence. Not far from his right flank. They are coming. He ploughs a frantic zigzag furrow through the snow, ricochets off of trunks starting up around him. Buried beneath the whiteness, a curling root betrays him, and he flies some distance to land spluttering in the snow. It hugs close, gathers to him. Invisible claws reach out to his neck. He flails and kicks himself back to his feet. When he hears the sound, all the world seems to slow. Water. He can hear water. Running water, a river. To the mountain or to the sea, either path will lead him clear. He turns towards it, gulping frost-bitten air. Fire roars in his ankle that took the force of his fall. He is limping, but not crippled, limping towards the sound. It grows louder with each hobbled step, filling up his mind. He can make out the shimmering reflections of moonlight frolicking like horses among the dire shades. He is bedazzled, pulled inexorably to the life source, so much so it is not until he hears the voice that he is aware of the smell. The ripe must of a great beast peppers the breeze. A calm, sonorous voice from out the deepening silence finds its way into Nitim's head and near stops his wild heart. Nitim. He freezes. His instincts have atrophied, his blood heat frozen out of him. He forces his head to the cluster of trees, and the breath is snatched from out his failing lungs. Here at last, he thinks, here is where I die. Some distance off, a creature stands between the trees, 2 men high, its bulk and shape obscured in the gloom. One strong limb holds it against a trunk. The tree trembles. It cannot bear the creature touching it. Nitim is trembling. He cannot bear the sight of its shining eyes. Tiny, silvery flashes. It blinks. Nitim. It speaks again, clear as a javelin's flight into his mind. Do not go to the water, son of the earth. You will find only death in the water. Come away. Come back. It makes a sound, but speaks no more. The creature evaporates into the deeper murk as if it never were. He would speak, but words choke in his throat. A visit, he thinks. A spectre to trick me. He knew the tales, knew the ways of the spirits, knew this place. He was right. He had found the path out of the forest, and now they sought to misguide him. They were cunning. They'd take duller wits in a heartbeat, but not him. He'd known all along. The others wouldn't listen. He'd warned them. He'd warned them all. Well, let the winter take them. He would survive. He would live, and they would die, and it would be right. He was strong, and they were weak. He wouldn't play the spirit's game. His mouth shrivels with thirst. His skin tightens with fatigue. A mist is gathering, snaky grey tendrils rising and fattening in the air. He tastes ice. A little further, and he was free. Free of them, free of the forest. He fixes his mind to his own survival and limps towards the water. Beneath the snow, the stirring. It listens to Nitim going off towards the water. Formless now, it has exhausted itself in ignored warning. Not strong enough yet. It must reach out. It writhes beneath the white carpet to gather little strength to its shape as sleek and swift forms crackle through the night in pursuit of their prey. It hears them, feels them, growls with insubstantial voice at them. Nitim's pride drives him deep and beyond saving. The staring spirit lumbers through intangibility. It must reach out before the dark's grasp is upon him. But too late. Much, much too late. The mist is thick. Chill coils smear his view and parts around him like ghost grass. He treads with care, following the blue-silver flashings of the reflective water. A stillness descends over his passage. The brilliant reflections are close. He is almost upon them. They leap and tumble all about him. But he hears no more water, cannot feel the vibration of the river. Feet crunch through snow and hit hard earth. Snow and earth, snow and earth, snow and ice. He jerks to a halt, ankle throbbing, and looks around him. He can hardly make out the wider landscape. His world whittled down to claustrophobic haze and fogbank. The water's reflections, the dancing ghosts, they're leaving. They ribbon away from him, streaking and rolling away through the mist into the trees until darkness swallows them whole. His breath wrenches, perspiration stings his skin. There is no river. The mist pulls away from him, drawn back by some unseen master. A wide ring fringed with trees, the narrow path by which he entered cut off by the crystalline curtain of fog, nowhere to run. A desperate flush carries through him. No! He falls to his knees, holds the torch low to the ground. He rubs at the thin dusting of snow beneath his feet. A wide pool, its surface frozen solid. Rubbing, wiping, polishing the slick mirrored surface until he sees his own reflection looking back at him through mercurial blackness. Why? He blubbers. Why do you torment me? Why are you doing this to me? I can't stand it. Hunters don't linger. Why are you torturing me? Why me? He thinks perhaps there is something in for Hush. An anticipation in the silence and shadow. Something in the woods that seems to say, yes, go on. The forest listens to him. He struggles and rises. I'll leave. I promise. This place is yours, not mine. Nothing comes. He licks his lips. He's grinning, and he doesn't know why. Take them. They're in the cave upon the slope. It's they who'd insult you. Let me leave and I'll show you them. You can have them while they sleep, but only let me go. Something stirs in him. A hot, watery stickiness swims from his gut to his chest and slithers about inside him. He is very aware of his teeth. There's a child, too, in the valley. Take her and all. Only spare me. Let me go and you can have them all. He waits. Nothing comes. Only the languid shifting of the mist about the trunks, the dull settling of the ice beneath him. He waits. Well, he says, won't you speak? The mist sighs, breathes out, rolls slowly back towards him, and somewhere there is a dull thump. No, not a thump. A knock. A knocking beneath his feet. He looks down and sees himself, his drowned reflection looking up at him, knocking on the ice and grinning. He knows why it's grinning. There is no articulation he can muster, no cry that he can utter. He chokes, stammers, stumbles. The world reels. His retreat is clumsy, too slow. A tree trunk blocks his path. He gasps. It is a tree trunk that had not been there before. It snatches attention for just a moment, and fire bursts inside his shoulder, a ragged, furious pain. He roars against the flashings before his eyes. There is nothing he can do by the time he realizes what has happened. His own spear. His own damnable spear driven clean through his shoulder and fixing him to the tree. He hasn't seen anyone throw it. His blood clogs and thickens his furs, freezing the wound fast. Were he any other animal, this would be when the rest of the hunting party emerged to finish off the kill. He feels something new. Something about his feet and legs, his flanks and his stomach. He looks down the length of his body. The snowflakes have fattened. They are sticking and gathering close to his furs. Their weight is pressing, clutching. He sees. The snow is climbing him from off the ground. It is crawling like a vast white mollusk and gathering about his flesh, fastening tightly to him. The cold, it bites. It chews into him, spreading slowly across him. He pulls away, but a lightning bolt of fresh torches skewers him by his shoulder, eaten alive by the winter. Every breath ragged and vital. Fright and pain spark one last flicker of strength in him, in his ruined form. He bellows into the night, Help! Thrask, help me! Help me, I beg of you! Not like this! Not like this! Feet, ankles, calves, all cocooned in the carnivorous frost. He jerks his feet. It only binds tighter. No one answers his call. There is no one to answer. He cannot pull away any further. Blinded for the snowflakes, fat, free-falling pustules, he spits and he splutters and he gasps. He growls and screeches. They stick to him all over, biting and burrowing into him, eaten alive, cannot move, cannot speak, only pain. The forest gnaws him like a bone. He makes a vain attempt with his free hand to pull the spear from out his shoulder. Numbed with pain, he begins to pull. The shock of it turns his stomach, brings it into his mouth. Snagged breath, and he weakly raises his head. He sees clear across the frozen pool. There is a figure stood watching him from the far side of it. In the blaze of flickering snowflakes, the true master of this place. How long has it been watching him? Like a dried corpse, guttering shadows, a shape cut out of the air into the abyss beyond. But the eyes, huge, lidless, without pigment or pupil, and glowing, glowing, glowing. It creeps a jarring, flinching path across the ice towards him. A moaning howl creaks from out the ether, drowns the shrieking wind. Yet in his body spasms in vain against its bonds. Had he not, too, many moons past, struck a deer through and watched the life bleed from out its bucking form, thrilled as its ghost reared from out its flesh and fled from him? The figure is beside him with no intermediate distance crossed. His shriek of fright is nothing in the growing, growling maelstrom. The air vibrates, quivers like leaves in the rain. The thing regards him quietly. It is human-shaped, but Nitim's eyes cannot settle on it. His mind is repulsed, revolts, retreats, pulls away from the creature, but the creature pulls him back. The snow gathers around him. His flesh boils away beneath the hugging frost. He whimpers, speech lost to him. Glowing eyes roam up and down his body. It reaches a long, clawed hand towards his face. He tries to pull away. He tries to bury himself into the bark. It will not yield. Snow climbs, crutches, grasps. His arms and chest eaten up, swallowed whole. Ice gathers in his beard, his eyes, his hair. Then the thing speaks. Scream, little one. He whimpers. No more words. Cut back through his tongue. Lightning storm of pain racks. Bloodied eyes dance around their final panorama. He cannot escape. He squeals, he twists, he bucks. No use, no escape. Its eyes, its smell. Its claws play down the length of his face to his chest. Its form, vile, corrupted, evil. No hope in a world where they dwelt. His tribe, his kind, all to die, all to vanish, this winter or the next, not their world. Its eyes, its claws upon his heart. The pinnacle of its longest talon twists above his breastbone, brittle with frost. Scream. And he does. Screams when the claw sinks into his breast and slides deep within, a single popping of the flesh, and it needles his heart. He screams the tuneless, witless wail of the unhinged, a cry of unbirth, formless, hysterical, frantic, howling as his mind shreds away from him, minced into the snowflakes, is the snowflakes. His blood freezes at the claw's touch. He is stripped away. He screams and he screams and he screams until the snow crawls to his face and fills his mouth and his nostrils, drowning him. He screams as his eyes freeze solid and his ears burst and is at last choked away into nothing. He screams until his last. Then the absence, the abyss. He ends here as if he never were. His fractured soul spirals away into the winter, consumed by the forest and the snow. Nitim is no more. He never was. No mound of snow, no abandoned spear or stump of torch, no footprints. No one came this way, or any way. ever. But for the breeze in the branches of the trees of the forest at the end of the world, silence. Always silence. But hush. Listen. In that breeze, a screaming. You still here, kids? That's a Christmas story, that. Fa la 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 la. Oh, shit. Look at all these. This has been happening. This is a thing that is among us. I will be with you in a second, darlings. I have gone too far back. Don't worry, guys. I am paying attention. I'm just trying to catch up through these. The point is, I obviously have no context for what these emojis are in relation to. I'm just seeing these hieroglyphics that go along with it. Oh. Oh, Dal, you always know best. Or at least what's best for me. Oh, did you really? In fact, did you really, Cerebral? Thank you very much. Although I have a broken heart emoji from Aphrodite up here that I would like. Oh, because he literally broke his heart. I see. Is this oh shit in relation to anything in particular? So yes, that is that's the first chapter of my. In fact, it's the very beginning of my dark fantasy trilogy. I hope it meets with approval, and that my frankly dreadful acting is didn't put you off. Yeah, I'm. Oh, bless you. The thing is, the first part of because the way I've been pitching this book to people is it's like a cross between A Christmas Carol and The War of the World, and it was I've been what was I saying? Yeah, the first part of it is amongst the cavemen. It's amongst the Cro-Magnon of like 70,000 years ago. So it's a really primal origin, blood on the snow origin of what we think of as the Christmas figures, because the Paleolithic traditions of shamanism have been passed down through every pagan tradition up until the present day. So it's sort of following that route all the way back. Yeah, A Christmas Carol is one of my favorite books. I'm thinking about doing. I think I mentioned this last week. I can't entirely remember, but of doing recordings of chapters from famous and also royalty-free books as a sort of advertisement for this audiobook stuff that you all keep talking about, and A Christmas Carol will be one of them, because I have scared people shitless with my Jacob Marley. And what is Christmas for if not scaring the shit out of people? But yes, I hope you liked it. I hope it was as atmospheric and as startling as I wanted it to be. Oh, Yeah, the ones I'm thinking about are the first chapter of A Christmas Carol, which fuck me, I know that book off by heart. I'm going to do the first chapter of The War of the Worlds, since I found out how that you have been suffering from a god awful audiobook narration. I think the famous chapter 5 of Frankenstein is a definite contender. But it also like there's the Raven and maybe the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I do not know. Oh dear me. Well, that's incredibly kind of you. Yeah, the it doesn't really spoil anything, but the trilogy, which I'm calling the Phantasmagoriverse, because that's fun, is what do you mean? I didn't make any changes. Stop that. Um, is what on earth was I saying? Oh yes, um, it's hardly a spoiler, but the trilogy is about the sudden collapse of the dream world and the waking world. So the two planes of existence start to bleed together with horrifying results. Oh wow, will you indeed, Aphrodite? I've always wanted to do a film version of that. I've always wanted to do a horror version of it. It's the most famous ghost story in the English canon, in the English language canon. Oh, Dal, right. Just to prove a point, and so we're not getting racked up again like we were. If you want, only if you want, because I really, really don't want to be self-indulgent here. Oh, actually, just before I carry on with that thought, just a second. No. Public. Yep, there's a new What Now video now on YouTube. So that's a thing. Yes, only if you want to. I can read that other chapter just to get your point of view. That's for the second one in the trilogy when things are getting really peculiar. If you want that, you decide amongst yourselves you want that to happen. But I am going to have to leave you with Fernando for a second because, at the risk of being crude, I am busting for a Waz. So if you'll excuse me a second. Fernando, Eiffel Tower, it's all on you. The real question is, why do I keep putting headphones on when none of you are speaking to me? Oh, yes, a wee, a urination. Ha! Yeah, I really do want to expand my skull collection. This is great. I mean, he was once part of a full skeleton, but the rest of him came apart. I want to tell him what you told us. Ah, but yes, I had one vote from Dal. I think that's what that block capital yes was for. Oh, okay. You know what? I just had it and I have lost it again. Yeah. So needless to say, I write dark fantasy. This one is odd, and it is specifically a horror story for creatives. Now, I must confess, this is a first draft version, so it's a bit plumper than it has any right to be. But this is specifically a horror story for the likes of you and me, but you as well. Because we've often talked about where our ideas and our characters come from. But have any of us ever wondered where the ones we abandon go? And what would happen if one of them came back for you? So it's not about a novel, it's about a film. This is called Talking Pictures. Fuck me, this is like oh, hang on. I used to write paranormal fantasy, but you'd never know it based on my current stuff. Right, this is weird. This is an awful lot like being naked in front of someone for the first time. But this is an odd one, and it's called Talking Pictures. Inspiration, excuse me. It says for 1 minute and suddenly you can't breathe. Inspiration comes from strange places, takes strange forms. It's not always obvious or tangible or even coherent in origin, but it turns up all the same. Even if you're completely befuddled and amnesiac about where it cropped up from, you can pretty much, for most of the time, eventually rationalize it, start building memories around where it must have come from. In this respect, if nothing else, a lot of people pass off the origins of random bouts of creative inspiration in much the same way as they pass off the origins of a cold. Oh, it must have been someone sneezing on the bus who didn't cover their mouth. Oh, I must have been sat in a draft. That sort of thing. It's a common enough occurrence. The only thing is that colds never just turn up out of nowhere, never simply come into being. Just because you're too proud, busy, or indeed sane to chart the virological family tree doesn't mean there isn't one. Inspiration, on the other hand, sometimes can be quantum. It just pops up without any discernible linear progression. It comes from strange places. And, you know, it works both ways. Look here. A breath of wind disturbs the orange dust, forever scrubbing out what began to stir there. And somewhere in the world, a writer has scribbled out a story's opening. Gone. Forever. A pale scorpion with fat pincers leaves its needle-point track where the words would have been, but were now there. But were now there as just the settling of a few more grains of sand. If every word were numbered as such a grain, then we have littered beaches in our time, and the words unwritten, unspoken, an endless stretch of desert, a horizon-hugging plain of red clay and orange dust beneath an empty port-purple sky. Well, where did you think they go? See, it is the outback of the imagination. The scorpions in the rough scrub and the hawks in the dead, bleached trees don't much care, and if they do, they've never offered any definitive statement on the matter. The land stretches on to bulge at the limits of comprehension, but not beyond it. It is not, after all, infinite. This is the land of stillborn dreams, of false stars, and the unfulfilled I wonder. It is the realization of the terminally unrealized. The wind picks up again, rubs out an emerging shape in the dust, depositing a quiet fistful of fresh grains. In a coffee shop off Bishopsgate, a laptop has crashed, and auto recovery, having failed, has wiped a fresh tail. Gone. Forever. The wind dies away, and it seems for a moment that there is the ghost of a melody on the breeze. Something eerily familiar, yet infuriatingly difficult to place. Listen. Oh, you know the one. It goes like this. Of course, you would never be able to hum along with the third track from the Beatles' 1982 reunion album. This is the land of the unsung. And then there's the city, of course. Or perhaps that should be the city, as it is the only such conglomeration of brick and stone and glass down here. It is the only one of its kind anywhere. A big, dark town, a Fritz Lang Manhattan, alone and stark out in the bush, German expressionism in aboriginal dream space. This is the citadel of Kudabin, the land of untold tales. Population, who knows? With the crooked skyscrapers and a coral reef of masonry and glass, it is reasonable to assume it would be impossible to miss, even in the immeasurable rolling swathes of outback. In reality, insofar as that word applies here, a wanderer couldn't miss it if they tried. All roads lead to the city, in so much as there are any roads, of which there are none. You will find it if you look for it. You will find it if you don't. The citadel is the only thing of any real gravity, the only thing even vaguely reminiscent of solidity, and in the metaphysical dust bowl of Kudabin, that is just as good as gravity. The only way to avoid it is to make a concerted effort, in which case the full expanse will not end for the abstract nomad. Not that any do try to avoid it. There are worse things than scorpions out there. Sometimes a story is developed enough to drag itself out of the ground, brush off the red clay, and walk on its own two, well, I suppose feet is correct. They're normally scared and confused and feeling more than a little abandoned. Snivelling and vulnerable, the docs find them and wipe their noses and tuck in their shirts and show them on their way to the citadel. Eternity in Kudabin begins with a single fretful, yes, step would be right. Not that they technically walk. And sorry sights they are too. Shambling, pseudo-figured creatures, the loosest of human shapes, snow globes of scrap paper and buzzing static, drawings or photographs, humping their way towards the slag heap of skyscrapers, dragging and sliding their tracks in the dust and the sand. They don't seem to pay any attention to the fact the sand whispers like a dreaming polyglot when it's disturbed. They are tethered too, girded like Jacob Marley around the waist and chest with wires and strands and threads, umbilical cords fastened to bouncing books and bundles of notes slurping through the dust. Poor creatures. Shades heading towards the big city. They blindly yearn for an audience. They'll be spoilt for choice on the streets. Steep and black and crooked, the main thoroughfare lurches upwards and around and sprouts in every direction into countless alleys and lanes and streets. It's a madman's mine shaft down here, tunneled out of the cool, dry air, the boulevard of undreamt dreams. This is where they dance. They find a space and they start to dance, and sing, and chant, and scream. They wave their appendages and bob about. They're alive. They're awake. They can't die. They're not, and never have been, technically alive. Some of them are in groups, tight little clusters where you'll see flashes and bites of blue electricity where they collide. 4 or 5 warbling and oscillating on the pavements and in the roads. Others are on their own, howling and hooting in shaded doorways or waiting in alleyways or under viaducts, waiting to pounce out at you. It's best to ignore them. These little whirlwinds of paper and celluloid buzzing incoherently. Sometimes the scent of an intelligible phrase in their muted screeching. Don't ask them what they're saying. Could you say that again, please? They'll tell you. Oh, Lord, they'll tell you. They'll tell you their whole story. But they are the whole story. And they're incomplete. They'll never be completed. And they'll give themselves to you. The ragged and maddened screech of the unborn. Don't ask, and they won't tell. They don't have eyes to see, but they know when there's an audience near. You'll be gripped by what could have been, take my word for it. And some of the more tenacious ones, the ones that have developed a little further and know their plight all the more, they'll have you riveted. The docs, if they can help, don't. But they keep an eye on the proceedings and make sure nothing gets out of hand. They're a strange bunch, but at least they are recognizably human. Leathery old men and women, skin of all shades and the texture of an old wallet. Mostly they're silent. They've said all they have to, and it'll take a lot to get them to speak up now. It's not impossible. They have their own super secret special means of communicating with each other, and certainly they can keep the unformed in check with a look or a squint or a tongue click. They mostly stay in their drum circles, smoking from long pipes and spraying long serpentine plumes of purple and red into the wine-rich Kudabin climate. Others pound the pavements. Some can be seen in deep conversation with the unformed, though you'll never hear what they say. And some even proffer folded maps, homes of the rich and famous, that they keep in the confines of their scruffy three-pieces, crudely hammered out of animal pelts. The deer and bear heads still hang loose. Tinseltown, where the drum circles obscure the names on every paving stone around the boulevard. Faded gold skull and crossbones with jagged and hooked titles have been unmade. No one visits here, but there's a tourist board just in case. There has to be a tourist board. There are rules about this sort of thing. But no one comes. No one knows it's here. And even if they did, they wouldn't be able to get in. Unless you already knew the way. Unless you'd already walked the boulevard of undreamt dreams and the cross-hatched nooks and crannies of Tinseltown. Unless you knew the city and every avenue and all the lost stories that made it up. Unless you'd seen the cyclic stretches of the outback and woods beyond them, heard the songs and the wind and the whispers from the sand, and climbed the rock face out of the trench higher and higher until Kudabin seemed a very long way away indeed. Out here in the outback of Kudabin, a breath of wind disturbs the orange dust. A tiny, almost imperceptible swirling in the grit. A pinhole maelstrom swirling stubbornly and meagerly, making a nuisance of itself. It refuses to be scrubbed out. I have skipped a bit, pardon me. Far, far away from Kudabin, in so much as distance can really be considered. A man is sitting all alone and deciding whether or not to make a phone call. If anyone in Kudabin, or indeed our own humble flesh and soil world, knew just what exactly was going on in the otherwise routine interplay between the waking and dreaming worlds, they would have been holding their local equivalents of breath. But they didn't know. No one knew. Because, as has been said, inspiration can come from very strange places indeed. Coiled cord corkscrews out of orange dust, and the loose end waggles freely in the cool air. Its feeble flailing is all that moves in the wilderness, staring the dryness. It catches a spark. A pale hawk in a dead tree swivels and darts. There's something alive there. Something growing. Something snagging and catching about the end of the telephone cord like a fish on a hook. A spark in the air. Another. Another. The hawk watches passively, watches a tiny popping and fizzing lightning storm framing a bright and flashing white halo around the coiled stem. A quickening and developing beacon of life between deep, deep purple and burnt, dry orange. Spectral detritus, quantum flotsam, pops and bulks about the cord like candy floss around a stick. Quicker and quicker strands of silver and white building and packing. There is a hiss, just a gnat's wing above hearing. An impression of greater pressure impressing on the still life landscape. A thumbprint in the paint. A careless swiping smudge of a pencil shading. There is something born of Could Have Been Tonight. Something tiny pries with tiny fingers and feels its way out of the fathomless dream earth. The hawk goes back to its silent business. It's business as usual. They'd be there soon enough, those who'd want to know, those who'd want to see a sudden tuft of spiraled cord that caught itself a ghost. The ghost of an idea. Yeah, I write shit. What can I say? So that all happened. And bloody hell, we're climbing towards the end. I do apologise. I have been unacceptably self-indulgent this evening. I can only apologise. It's certainly remiss of me. Christ, I just want someone to tell me I'm bad so I can stop. Thank you very much for indulging me. But yes, those are the two opening chapters of the first two novels of my trilogy. I haven't written anything really of the third. I know the story, but I know the story from like I don't know, what would you say? Like the end of Act 1. I don't have the beginning. The only thing I can say for certain, if I was trying to flog it, is that it's set up like it's going to be Jurassic Park, but very quickly it becomes apparent it's actually Chernobyl. But imagine the Chernobyl disaster, but instead of radiation, it was magic. I think that's sort of what I'm working towards, but the nightmare nature of what I now know the publishing industry to be like is I need something that would have real legs on it on a more popular market before I could even move towards it. I mean, I have pitched this series, I have pitched this trilogy, and certainly seemed interested in it. So I brought it up again in my query letter that there was the Shakespeare one, this trilogy, and then an alternate history political thriller, which I've been doing a lot of research on. So those are really the five, and then there's the whole page. But yes, so those are the first two chapters of the first two books in my trilogy. Strictly speaking, the novel that I'm trying to sell at the moment is like the primer. So it's like we can think of the trilogy I've just described to you is The Lord of the Rings, and the novel I have at the moment is The Hobbit. But yes, that's where we stand. And we are up to the 2 hour mark, which means we are at the end of our time together. Sort of a Monday evening, or certainly Monday evening for me, I will put a notice on the Facebook group for a book of bedtime, because I now do not have anything unless reading the entirety of the novel Howl currently has. The the one you have, Howl, is the Hobbit of the group, and Envy is in all 3 of these. Please, Aphrodite, is I will say. Oh, and incidentally, while I have you all here, I hope you will be good enough to have a look at my new video, which is an announcement video for a series of collaborative projects that I am doing, or will be doing. I can only do a collaborative project if people are interested in collaborating. And I will read it. That is no problem, because I really can't read the whole of my current novel on here, because I would need a voice cast. There's too many. Howl will attest. There's too many different variations. Oh, hello, Ava. You're with us. Oh, do you mean for the What Now book at bedtime? Is that what you're interested in? But yes, as Hal can tell you, the book has too many viewpoint characters for one person alone to do it. Love Smiles. More interested in what particularly? Oh, well, there wouldn't be much in the way of video creation on your behalf. It's Lord, how'd I go about? I've done a video on it. It's on my channel. It will explain everything. Ah, yes, the Phantasmagoriverse, which I may have to change, but frankly, I don't want to. It sounds. I'm sort of going for a Terry Gilliam / Guillermo del Toro crossover. That's sort of where I want to sit creatively. Right. Well, we are past our time. So, is there any final business? Is there anything that's again? I'm terribly embarrassed. I should not have been as self-indulgent as I should have been. Aphrodite, I hope you will. I really hope you will. And Dal, I could always count on you. But yes, ordinarily I'm quite interactive with you all. I've been rather, again, self-indulgent, which is not a good look. I will avoid that in future. So, is there any final business, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters? Are we good? Are we cool? Are we all getting along swimmingly? Then I will. Ha 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 ha. That's very kind of you. Well, I'll tell you what. If my book is picked up, if this agent wants it, then I will read more of the. In fact, I will read any of the novel I have at present. That can be like a little celebration. If he asks for the if he asks for the full manuscript, I will read the first part. If I get representation, I will read the whole damn thing in a. Because it would be a celebration, I could draft someone in, couldn't I, to read it with me? Because we can do that. Right. Well, so. Well, you don't need to phone him. I follow him on Twitter, and I happen to know that he is currently holed up in his house because of the quarantine, completely arsehole on wine with my book. The absolute earliest I could expect to hear back from it would be Monday. And to be honest, as I've said before, I'm not really holding out a massive amount of hope that he will want anything more to do with it. But I will be tremendously disappointed if I just get the cut and paste thanks but no thanks email. I think I'm not blowing my own trumpet here when I say that after meeting with him once and making the changes he requested, if I'm going to be rejected, I would like a proper rejection letter. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask for under these particular circumstances. So the call to action is, I will post a reminder on the COVID Writers page for a general call out for a book at bedtime. Maybe if I can gather a load together, then I can just schedule them one after the other, and we won't have this problem. Take a look at my new video. I will share it on the AuthorTube pages to see if I can drum up some interest. And yes, that is about it. I am going to go for a cigarette. And that's about it. So if we are ready for the legendary What Now sign off, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades all, thank you so much for joining me. It really, really means a lot. And I will see you again in your dreams. Good.